I would like to offer some reflections and summary, and to summarize the main points that were raised during the seminar, in terms of content, to a bit digest the very rich program and insights that we had yesterday and this morning. So first of all, of course, we are very pleased, and it's very important initiative to enhance the teaching about the communist past, and also the repression that it entailed practically, and to build an educational program on the side of the authority is a very valuable task that can enrich the informal education of citizens, but also the formal education of students, and thus contribute to the democratic competences and democratic education and culture in the country. So to summarize the main point, I think we heard that besides learning about the political history of the establishment and the evolution of the communist regime, it's very important to also provide a human dimension of the everyday life in communism, and to offer a micro perspective, which is important actually for several reasons. So it's not only this is, for example, a very good way to make students relate better to the history, to increase the interest, because when we talk about everyday life and the perspective of ordinary people, let's say, it is less distant. History becomes less distant, appears less distant, than when the focus is exclusively laid, of course, on the political dimension, and the history is connected to political figures, leaders, and geopolitical developments. And part of this is, of course, also to look into the different experiences that people had in this time, gender, different age groups, the childhood, for example, of people to that time, family affiliations, and the consequences of political orientations and actions also before the communist past, for example, maybe here very interesting to shed light on in the teaching. And here, of course, the perspective of the persecuted is also very important and a key element, which to make the citizens and the learners familiar with the repression and the concrete consequences of such actions, not only on a macro level, on society level, and in terms of the how it kind of stabilized the regime and the grab to power, but also to see how this really affected the persons directly in their everyday life, which they will find are per se not too much different to their own lives, and to see also the the consequences it has for their personal lives. This allows them to also understand more on an emotional level what this kind of repression did to the people, and to relate to such histories, to strengthen their commitment also to oppose to totalitarian tendencies in society, and to be active citizens, promoting democracy and participating as active citizens. But how can we do this? So a mix of online and offline formats is probably a good solution, as we heard also during the seminar today. So interviews with survivors can keep the stories alive of survivors of such repression. And this is especially important in an environment where, of course, these citizens become older and will not be available live in future for an indefinite time. So joining forces with civil society organizations here could be, of course, also key, and to benefit from the rich work that has been done, for example, as we heard from Koito.al. Also, by introducing, besides the files, personal stories of survivors is an important counterpole, because it, while the files have the perpetrator perspective, and thus you kind of read the histories of the person, well, through the lenses of the Sigurimi, which kind of objectifies, well, the persons who were dealt with. This actually gives back the agency also to the survivors and to the people persecuted by the regime, and thus makes them the subjects of their own histories. So besides this, developing educational games can be an engaging way for students to understand the perspective of the prosecutors, their dilemmas they face in a life-threatening environment, actually. And Here, it might be valuable to also think of the format. So we saw that creating smaller mobile phone-based games, for example, might be valuable to provide wider access to such games. It's also less budget intense to develop such games, and when they're shorter, also easier to integrate in the teaching. Third, it is of course important to prepare educational materials tailored to the needs of the students, and also here different age groups and their needs are to be taken into consideration. Here we heard, for example, that for younger students and learners, symbols might, for example, working with symbols rather than, for example, historical photos that might be more disturbing, can be a more appropriate way to familiarize them with the topic without psychologically straining them too much. Fourth, we heard that the construction or the reconstruction of memorial sites is a very important aspect, and it can be done in several ways. For example, of course, physically, but we saw also, for example, from the Berlin example, that you can also do digital reconstructions of such spaces and also integrate, for example, files, exceptional files, survivor testimonies in this to really create a rich and engaging environment for the learners. And of course, here it's important, as we heard, it's not always the case to also put the perspective of the survivors, of the victims, in focus of such remembrance without assuming the role of the perpetrators here. So field trips to such sites or the integration of such reconstructed models can be very valuable endeavors to pursue to teach these histories. 5, we need activities that need to be designed in ways that they activate their critical thinking. So learners shall be given the different materials and sources based on state-of-the-art research, international and national, to be able to confront different sources, different narratives, and to be able to, together with their teachers, actually come to a balanced and well-informed conclusion regarding the topic. And here, of course, active learning is a very important point, so that giving the learners the kind of the agency to educate themselves, of course, with the guidance of the teachers, as research also showed that this is a very engaging way to foster the critical thinking skills of the learners. And by doing this, of course, it also strengthens their resilience to manipulations of such histories for perhaps other agendas, which may also serve not the most democratic agendas. So 6th, it is also important to understand the European dimension of such histories. So to understand that this is there are similarities, but also differences if one looks in other countries of Europe, for instance, and also to benefit, of course, from the rich expertise of other such projects and teaching agendas in other countries, and to closely cooperate with such organizations which are experienced in the field, as all here it was practically, well, it was practiced during this seminar already, and I would very much ask and encourage all stakeholders, also who are connected online, the internationals, to stay available for cooperations. In all of this, it might be worthwhile not only to portray the persecuted as passive victims, but also to speak about resistance and resilience, to stress their agency, which helps to actually humanize them and foster identification with the victims and survivors, and gives them also back a piece of dignity, let's say, which was taken by, of course, dehumanizing them, objectifying them, and persecuting them. Last but not least, it is important to train the teachers accordingly in such ways that they are capable of engaging in this journey, let's say, with the students, which, if one focuses critical thinking, the outcomes are not always certain in the classroom discussions. And so teachers need to be prepared to engage in a meaningful manner in such topics, and to put the learners in the focus of such such teaching. So here, of course, the cooperation with not only with international organizations, but also with teacher training institutes are, of course, key to such endeavors. And last but not least, it's again to stress the need to cooperate with the wide coalition of stakeholders also in the country. So as we heard, also the role of media can be very important, and we heard also from the Slovene experience that radio formats on a regular level could be perhaps something that could be a way to kind of in an interesting way to portray those histories and discussions to a broader audience that might perhaps not actively pursue museum visits or similar kinds of educational activities. And I think with this, I would like to pass it over to Ms. Sola, the chairwoman. Okay.